Welcome to another edition of the Classic Traction Collection, and in this programme we will be taking a look at the ever popular English Electric Class 50s that can still be seen operating on many preserve lines throughout the country. The Class 50s have certainly enjoyed a resurgence over the last decade, with no less than 18 class members preserved nationwide. And in this programme, we will see the class in action not only on the main line, but also on preserve lines around the country. There have been many occasions over the years when Class 50s have masqueraded as long scrap members of the class, and we begin by returning to September 2006, when 50042 Triumph re-entered service on the bobbin in Wentford and ran briefly as long scrap classmate 50006 Neptune, and we see her as she arrives at Bodmin General. Another English electric machine based at Bodmin is Class 3737142, a former St Blaise China clay machine, which will see piloting Neptune as they approach Bodmin Parkway. With the two machines working in multiple, the driver has some 4,500 horsepower at his disposal, and this time with Neptune leading, they round Dreesen's curve and begin to climb the 1 in 37 gradient back up to Bodmin. 11th of June 2016 witnessed the welcome return of a pair of Class 50s to the Waterloo route. And passing the tiny village of Monkton, just west of Andover, 50007 Hercules and 50050 Fearless head the Purbeck and Bomo Explorer to Swanage. Having avoided Salisbury by means of Laverstock North and South junctions, the tour then continued via Romsey, Southampton and Bournemouth before arriving at Wareham for a short pickup stop before continuing on to Swanage. Almost 9 hours after leaving Derby, the end is almost in sight as 50007 Hercules and 50050 Fearless cross Corfe Common at Afflington Bridge as they head down the Swanage branch. Returning via Southampton, the rail tour evokes fond memories of Class 50s on Waterloo route diversions during the 1980s, and we see 50050 and 50007 on the outskirts of Southampton as they pass through St Denis, with the return working. Returning to the West Country, 50049 Defiance and 50007 Hercules head the Torbay and Dart Explorer Rail Tour from Burton-on-Trent to Kingswear, and having just departed with the return working, the English electric pair look in fine form as they leave Kingswear and pass Britannia Crossing. On the 14th of April 2018, Class 50s once again return to their old stomping ground of the West Coast Main Line, and we see 50007 Hercules and 50049 Defiance as they head south near Winnock Junction with the return Cumbrian Hoovers Rail Tour. .5008 Thunderer is normally resident on the East Lancs Railway, but during a visit to the Severn Valley for their 2017 Diesel Gala, she leaves Bewdley for Kidderminster, with Vosla Class 88 88003 Genesis attached to the rear. .5008 has been beautifully restored in late 1980s Civil Engineering Departmental Blue, what was commonly referred to as Lara Blue, and so we see her as she approaches Foley Park Tunnel with GB Rail Freight Class 66 66771 bringing up the rear. Living up to her name, Thunderer makes a wonderful noise as she pounds up Erdington Bank, and with the matching rake of Intercity Mark IIs, it's almost a perfect recreation of many secondary routes throughout the late 1980s and early 1990s. returning to Bewdley, we see Thunderer as she trundles through Light Engine before leaving the goods loop with a permanent way train for Kidderminster. .5008 Thunderer returned again to the West Country in early January 2018, when she was used to collect some 7 rail grinders that had been used at Oakhampton, and she passes through Crediton with the 4Z03 0800 Oakhampton to Chaddeston working. On arrival at Exeter Riverside, Class 56, 56104, was attached to the rear, and we hear the wonderful noise from the Class 50's English Electric Power Plant as Thunderer storms through Rue on her way north. Another Class 50 reincarnation occurred on the 23rd of June 2018, when 50049 and 50007 were renumbered as long-scrapped classmates 50011 Centurion and 50006 Neptune for the occasion of the Maisie Day Cornishman, and we see the pair as they cross St Pinnock Viaduct on the way to Penzance. Centurion was the first Class 50 to be withdrawn in February 1987, closely followed by 50006 Neptune, and we see this historic pairing as they return from Penzance, passing through the suburbs of Plymouth at Keyham. Another Class 50 reincarnation occurred on the 23rd of March 2019, when 50049 Defiance and 50007 Hercules headed the Class 50 Terminator Phoenix rail tour to Penzance, with 50007 being reincarnated as Long Scrap's sister 50014 Warspite. Recently unveiled in their new colours of GB Rail Freight, just outside Saltash they passed Defiance platform, which once served HMS Defiance, a former Royal Navy torpedo training school. The rail tour celebrated the 25th anniversary of the final Class 50 workings in BR service in 1994. And who could have imagined that in 2019 there would be 18 preserved examples as well as 5 mainline registered 50s. And we see 50014 Warspite and 50049 Defiance as they cross Keyham Viaduct in Plymouth suburbs. For 5 years, from 2009 until 2014, 50017 Royal Oak was operated at the Plym Valley Railway in Plymouth, and we see her as she leaves the railway's terminus at Marsh Mills and passes Marsh Mills North Junction. For many years, Royal Oak was a local Lehrer machine, and in 1986 was one of two Class 50s chosen to launch the original Network Southeast livery. Beautifully restored to this livery, Royal Oak climbs towards World's End Bridge with Class 08 13002 on the rear. The Plym Valley operates over part of the former Great Western branch to Launceston that closed in 1962, and we see Royal Oak as she approaches Leamore Crossing, halfway between Marsh Mills and Plym Bridge. Climbing towards Plym Bridge, Royal Oak passes the site of Canada Siding as she eases her train towards Plym Bridge platform. To date, Royal Oak is still the only Class 50 to have ever worked over the former Launceston branch, and we see her as she draws into Plym Bridge platform, the Plym Valley's current limit of operations. Returning from Plimbridge, Royal Oak eases around the curve at World's End Bridge as she returns to Marsh Mills. Passing Marsh Mills North Junction, this would be among the final runs in passenger service for Royal Oak on the Plym Valley, as the following year she would be sold to Neil Bowden, who would return her to mainline operation. The highlight of the May 2012 Swanage Railway Diesel Gala was the return to traffic of 50026 Indomitable after an extensive overhaul at Eastleigh, and we see Indomitable as she enters Corfe Castle. Credit to her owner, Paul Spracklin, Indomitable looks and sounds incredible as she gets underway from Corfe Castle, where we hear the wonderful noise of her 16-cylinder English Electric power plant to full effect. .5026 was new in March 1968 as D426, and like all the Class 50s, was built by English Electric at Vulcan Foundry. Transferred to the Western region in May 1974, she was refurbished at Doncaster Works in late 1982, the condition in which we see her represented in today. 5026 received the name Indomitable on the 29th of March 1978, at a time when she was based at Lera, and so we see her as she descends past Hurston and approaches Swanage. Class 50s were no strangers to West Yorkshire in their working lives, often working over the Settling-Carlisle route. And in May 2019, 50031 Hood returned to the county when she visited the Keighley and Worth Valley for their annual diesel gala. The 50s have carried many fictitious liveries in preservation, and one of the latest repaints has been carried out on 50031 Hood, which is adorned in intercity livery from the late 1980s, which seems to suit the class particularly well. And so we see Hood as she approaches Mytholm's Tunnel. Returning to the Swanage Railway, we see Hood again as she gets underway from Corfe Castle and heads to Swanage, beautifully displaying the attractive intercity colour scheme. "5035" was the first Class 50 to be named, receiving the name Ark Royal at Plymouth Station on the 10th of January 1978. Today, she is one of 5 Class 50s under the care of the 50 Fund on the Severn Valley, and we see Ark Royal as she gets underway at Bridge North and passes through Oldbury Cutting. well as being the first Class 50 to be named, she was also the first one to be preserved, and during a visit to the Swanage Railway we see her as she heads a train across Corfe Common. "5035 entered traffic on the 3rd of August 1968 and was to spend 7 years operating over the northern section of the West Coast Main Line before transferring to the western region, initially being based at Bristol Bath Road in January 1976. Reaching Journey's End, different generations of former Southern Region power pass each other as Ark Royal, a former Waterloo route and Network South East machine, enters Swanage. Returning from Swanage, we see Ark Royal as she descends towards the passing point at Harmon's Cross. Today, 50035 is one of the most popular members of the class, perhaps down to the fact that she bears the name of Britain's most iconic aircraft carrier. And so we leave Ark Royal as she departs from Corfe Castle. Cornwall has a long association with Class 50s, and it's therefore only fitting that one should be preserved in the county at the Bodmin and Wenford Railway. 50042 Triumph has been preserved here since shortly after withdrawal, and we see her as she leaves Bodmin and rounds Quarry Curve. popular diesel on the railway, 50042 is restored to mid-1980s large logo livery, complete with black roof. That was a trademark of many Lara depot overhauls. And so we see triumph as she passes Charlie's Gate and tackles the 1 in 37 gradient up to Bodmin. And pounding up Coalsloggett Bank, her English Electric 16-cylinder engine makes a wonderful noise as she returns to Bodmin. .5044 Exeter returned to the main line on the 21st of July 2012, when she headed a GB rail freight special from Cardiff to Plymouth via Paignton. And having just joined the Paignton line at Aller Divergence, we see Exeter as she passes Aller Vale. Returning via Newton Abbot, 50044 heads to Plymouth and begins to tackle the formidable South Devon banks as she passes Longlands Bridge and begins to climb Dainton Bank. Having arrived at Plymouth, the tour was then serviced at Lara Depot, and at Mount Gold Junction, Exeter, together with GB Rail Freight 66720 on the rear, passes Lara's washing plant as they head to Lara Junction. a sound that has been missed for far too long as a Class 50 climbs the 1 in 42 gradient of Hemerdon Bank. And making a superb noise, we hear 50044 Exeter with 66 720 on the rear as they return to Cardiff. .5049 Defiance was the last Class 50 to be built and entered traffic on the 11th of December 1968. And we see Defiance as she enters Corfe Castle during one of the Swanage Railway's ever popular diesel galas, proudly wearing Lara Depot's trademark black roof. .5049 was transferred to the Western region in May 1974, and we see her as she returns from Swanage and enters Harmon's Cross. One of 5 mainline registered Class 50s, during the 2018 Swanage Railway Diesel Gala, she was used on the Corfe Castle to Wareham shuttles, and with D6515 on the rear, she passes Fursbrook sidings on the way to Wareham. And what a naval pairing it makes, as 50049 Defiance, with D6515 Lieutenant Jenny Lewis RN on the rear, pass Creech Bottom with another of the Wareham shuttles. As a dedicated Lara 50 for most of her life, it was perhaps appropriate that she would receive the name Defiance after the Fleet Maintenance Base at Devonport in Plymouth, and we see 50049 as she enters Wareham with one of the Diesel Gala shuttles. As a mainline registered Class 50, 50049 continues to see mainline action all over the country, and on the 3rd of December 2019 was used to haul a rake of HST trailers from Lara to Long Marston for storage. As she passes Hampden Loop, the irony can't be missed that she is now placing into store the very trains that replaced them on express workings during the 1970s and 80s. It certainly is a Class 50 resurgence.